It was a chilly evening in late October, the kind of night where the air feels electric with the anticipation of Halloween. I had just moved to a new town, a small, sleepy place that seemed like the perfect escape from the hustle and bustle of the city. The houses were old but charming, the streets lined with trees that were shedding their autumn leaves. I felt a sense of peace and excitement as I walked to the local cafe to grab a coffee and maybe meet some new people. The cafe was a quaint little place, filled with the warm aroma of brewing coffee and the soft hum of quiet conversations. I ordered a latte and sat down at a corner table, taking in the atmosphere. That's when I noticed her. She was sitting alone at a table near the window, a striking woman with dark hair and piercing green eyes. She had a presence that was hard to ignore, a sort of quiet intensity that made me curious. Our eyes met, and she gave me a polite nod. I nodded back, and before I knew it, she was walking over to my table. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice smooth and inviting. "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. She introduced herself as Lydia, and we quickly fell into easy conversation. She was charming and well-spoken, with a keen interest in history and the occult. I found her knowledge fascinating, and we talked for hours about everything from ancient civilizations to supernatural legends. She seemed like a perfectly normal, if somewhat eccentric, woman. As the evening wore on, Lydia invited me to join her for a small gathering at her place later that week. She mentioned it was a group of like-minded individuals who shared an interest in the occult and the paranormal. Intrigued and feeling a bit adventurous, I agreed. The night of the gathering arrived, and I found myself standing outside an old Gothic-style house on the edge of town. It was a far cry from the quaint charm of the cafe, but I brushed off the unease that was creeping into my mind. After all, Lydia had been nothing but friendly and interesting. I knocked on the heavy wooden door, and it creaked open to reveal Lydia, who greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome, come on in," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. The interior of the house was dimly lit, with flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could hear faint chanting from another room, and my curiosity was piqued. Lydia led me to a spacious living room where a group of people were gathered. They all seemed perfectly normal at first glance, chatting and laughing as if they were at any regular social event. But as the evening progressed, I began to notice subtle oddities. The conversations drifted towards darker topics, and I caught glimpses of strange symbols etched into the walls and furniture. There was an underlying tension in the air, a sense of something hidden beneath the surface. Lydia must have noticed my unease because she placed a reassuring hand on my arm and said, "Don't worry, it's all part of the experience. You're safe here." I nodded, trying to relax, but a nagging feeling of discomfort persisted. As the night went on, Lydia led us into a large room at the back of the house. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. The room was dominated by a large altar covered in black cloth, adorned with candles, crystals, and other occult paraphernalia. The group gathered around the altar, their demeanor now solemn and focused. Lydia stepped forward, taking on a more authoritative presence. "Tonight, we gather to honor the ancient rites and connect with the deeper forces of the universe," she said, her voice carrying a weight of ritualistic significance. I watched as the group began a series of chants and incantations. At first, it seemed like an elaborate performance, but as the ritual progressed, the energy in the room grew palpable. The air felt thick, and a sense of unease settled over me. I wanted to leave, but I felt rooted to the spot, unable to tear myself away from the unfolding scene. The chanting grew louder and more intense, the room seeming to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I glanced around, noting the glazed expressions on the faces of the participants. It was as if they were in a trance, completely absorbed in the ritual. Suddenly, Lydia turned to me, her eyes burning with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. "Join us," she said, her voice both commanding and inviting. I hesitated, unsure of what to if. The logical part of my mind screamed to leave, but another part of me, driven by curiosity and the strange allure of the moment, found myself stepping forward. As I approached the altar, Lydia handed me a small, ornate dagger. "Draw a small cut on your palm and let your blood join ours," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for refusal. With trembling hands, I did as she asked, wincing as the blade cut into my skin. I watched as a small drop of blood fell onto the altar, mingling with the others. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The room seemed to spin, and I struggled to keep my balance. The candles flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. I felt a presence, something dark and malevolent, closing in around me. The air grew cold, and the sense of dread intensified. Just as I thought I might pass out, the chanting abruptly stopped. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. Lydia stepped forward, her eyes still locked onto mine. "Welcome to the fold," she said, her voice a mix of triumph and menace. The group began to disperse, their demeanor returning to that of casual acquaintances. But I knew better. Something had changed, something dark and irreversible. I left the house in a daze, my mind racing with what I had just witnessed. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. I would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling a presence in my room. Shadows moved where there should have been none, and I heard faint whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Objects in my apartment would be inexplicably moved, and I constantly felt like I was being watched. Desperate for answers, I reached out to Lydia, hoping she could shed some light on what was happening. She invited me back to her house, assuring me that she could help. When I arrived, Lydia greeted me with a knowing smile. "I see you're experiencing some after effects," she said, her tone almost amused. "What did you do to me?" I demanded, my fear turning to anger. "We awakened something within you," she replied cryptically. "You are now connected to forces beyond this world." I felt a surge of panic. I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to learn more about the occult, not become part of some dark ritual. Lydia's expression softened slightly. "I understand your fear, but you must embrace this. You have the potential to access great power and knowledge." "I don't want any part of this," I said firmly. "I just want my life back." Lydia sighed. "Very well. There is a way to sever the connection, but it will require another ritual." Desperate to end the torment, I agreed. Lydia instructed me to return that evening, and we would perform the ritual to break the bond. That night, I returned to the house, my apprehension growing with each step. Lydia led me back to the same room with the altar, now prepared for a different kind of ritual. The atmosphere was just as tense, but there was an air of finality about it. Lydia began chanting, her voice low and rhythmic. She instructed me to focus on my intention to break the connection, to visualize myself free from the dark presence that had been haunting me. I followed her instructions, my mind filled with a desperate hope. As the ritual progressed, I felt a strange sensation, like a heavy weight lifting from my chest. The air seemed to clear, and the oppressive feeling began to fade. Lydia's chanting grew louder, more intense, and I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. With a final, powerful incantation, Lydia brought the ritual to a close. The room fell silent, and I could feel a sense of calm settling over me. The dark presence was gone, and I felt free for the first time in days. Lydia looked at me, her expression one of both relief and sadness. "It is done. You are no longer bound to the darkness." I nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and residual fear. "Thank you," she smiled faintly. "Take care, and be cautious in your curiosity. Not everything is as harmless as it seems." I left Lydia's house that night, feeling a sense of closure. The strange occurrences stopped, and my life slowly returned to normal, but I would never forget the chilling experience and the lesson it taught me about the dangers of delving too deeply into the unknown. Years later, I still occasionally think about Lydia and that fateful night. I've stayed away from the occult and paranormal since then, content to leave those mysteries unexplored. The memory of the darkness I encountered serves as a constant reminder of the thin line between curiosity and peril, and the importance of respecting the unknown. After that night, my interactions with Lydia became more frequent. Our connection grew deeper, and despite the dark experiences, I found myself drawn to her. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, and soon, our relationship transitioned from friends to something more. Lydia became my girlfriend, and I was captivated by her intelligence, charm, and the mysterious aura that surrounded her. As we spent more time together, I began to notice small, unsettling changes in her behavior. At first, they were minor and easy to dismiss. She would occasionally whisper strange incantations under her breath or leave cryptic notes around my apartment. I chalked it up to her fascination with the occult and tried not to think too much of it. However, as our relationship progressed, these oddities became harder to ignore. Lydia started to make unusual requests, asking me to participate in more rituals and ceremonies. She explained that they were harmless, meant to bring us closer and enhance our bond. Reluctantly, I agreed, not wanting to disappoint her. One night, Lydia invited me to her house for a special ritual. She insisted it was important for our relationship and that it would strengthen our connection. When I arrived, the house was filled with an eerie ambiance. Candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls, and the scent of incense hung heavy in the air. Lydia greeted me at the door, wearing a flowing black robe adorned with intricate symbols. She led me to the ritual room, where an elaborate altar had been set up. The atmosphere was charged with an otherworldly energy, and I felt a growing sense of unease. "We're going to perform a binding ritual tonight," Lydia explained, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "It will link our souls and allow us to share our deepest thoughts and desires." I hesitated, the memory of the previous ritual still fresh in my mind. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Lydia smiled reassuringly. "Trust me, it will bring us closer than ever before." Despite my reservations, I nodded and followed her instructions. Lydia began the ritual, chanting in a language I didn't understand. She handed me a small vial of dark liquid and instructed me to drink it. I hesitated, but under her watchful gaze, complied. The liquid burned as it went down, and I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. Lydia continued her incantations, and the room seemed to spin. I struggled to stay upright, my vision blurring. As the ritual reached its climax, I felt a surge of energy, followed by an overwhelming sense of connection. It was as if our minds were merging, our thoughts and emotions intertwining. For a brief moment, it was exhilarating, but then the darkness crept in. Visions flashed before my eyes, distorted faces, twisted landscapes, and malevolent entities. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, and the connection with Lydia became suffocating. It was no longer a bond of love, but a tether to something dark and sinister. I struggled to break free, but Lydia's grip tightened. Her eyes were no longer filled with warmth, but with a cold, unyielding determination. "You can't leave now," she whispered. "We're bound together forever." Panic set in, and I fought to regain control. With a final burst of willpower, I broke free from the connection, collapsing to the floor. The room was spinning, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Lydia knelt beside me, her expression unreadable. "Why did you resist?" she asked, her voice tinged with disappointment. "I can't do this," I gasped, my heart pounding. "This isn't what I wanted." Lydia's expression softened, and she helped me to my feet. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I thought it would bring us closer." I shook my head, trying to clear the lingering sense of dread. "I need some time to think." Over the next few days, I distanced myself from Lydia, trying to make sense of what had happened. The visions and feelings from the ritual haunted me, and I couldn't shake the sense of unease. Despite my love for Lydia, I knew I couldn't continue down this dark path. When I finally confronted her, Lydia was surprisingly understanding. She agreed to give me space and promised not to involve me in any more rituals. Our relationship continued, but there was an unspoken tension between us, a shadow that lingered in the background. As time went on, the strange occurrences in my apartment resumed. Objects would move on their own, and I felt a constant sense of being watched. Lydia's behavior grew more erratic, and I began to suspect that she was behind the disturbances. One night, I woke to find Lydia standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. She was chanting softly, her hands moving in intricate patterns. I felt a wave of fear wash over me, and I knew I had to put an end to this. "Lydia, stop!" I shouted, sitting up in bed. She froze, her eyes locking onto mine. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This is for us." "No, it's not," I replied firmly. "I can't live like this. You need to stop, or we're done." Tears filled Lydia's eyes, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the woman I had fallen in love with. "I don't want to lose you," she said softly. "Then let me go," I pleaded. "Release whatever hold you have on me." Lydia nodded slowly, her expression filled with sorrow. "I will," she promised. but you need to understand, this darkness is a part of me. I can't change who I am." With that, she left, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The disturbances stopped, and my life began to return to normal. Lydia and I drifted apart, our relationship unable to withstand the strain of her dark practices. In the years that followed, I occasionally heard rumors about Lydia. Some said she had joined a secretive cult, while others claimed she had disappeared entirely. I never saw her again, but the memories of our time together remained, a haunting reminder of the thin line between love and darkness. The experience left me with a deeper understanding of the dangers of delving into the unknown and the importance of setting boundaries. I learned to trust my instincts and to be cautious in my curiosity. Most of all, I learned that some connections, no matter how intense, are not meant to be. My encounter with Lydia taught me to respect the mysteries of the world and to be mindful of the forces we invite into our lives. While I still have a fascination with the occult and the paranormal, I approach it with a newfound caution, always aware of the shadows that lurk just beyond the light. Years later, I found myself back in that small town, drawn by a mix of nostalgia and a desire for closure. The old Gothic house was still there, now abandoned and overgrown with ivy. I stood at the edge of the property, memories flooding back. As I turned to leave, I felt a presence beside me. It was fleeting, a whisper on the wind, but it was enough to remind me of the past. I walked away, feeling a sense of peace and resolution. The darkness that had once surrounded me was now a distant memory, a chapter in my life that had shaped me but no longer defined me. In the end, my encounter with Lydia was a journey into the heart of darkness, and back again. It taught me the value of light and the strength of the human spirit. And while the shadows may always be there, I know now that I have the power to choose my path and to find my way back to the light. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we upload new videos.